If you have been working in the office for some time, you know that occasionally weird things just happen. Maybe your coworker arrives with an arm sling one day, maybe someone trashes the boss's car, maybe there's a bomb threat in your building, and oftentimes people would just take it in stride. Something might happen to you, making you miss a day. Well, chances are no one would even bat an eye, and the first question your coworkers would ask is whether they can eat your lunch. That's just how office work is sometimes. Which brings us to Dispatch, a game about superheroes, office work, and personal problems, not necessarily in that order. Goes without saying, but there will be spoilers. All of them. So if you somehow do not know what this is about, turn this video off right now and go play the game, right? Alright. The game is full of violence, messy situations, swearing, oh, and also dicks. I mean, seriously, there's a noticeable amount. Reminds me a bit of Love, Death and Robots in that regard. Also, the game has a story with surprisingly satisfying thematic through line, fun dialogues, and memorable characters. I mean, you probably don't need me to tell you what Dispatch is anyways. Among the characters there are two romance options, Invisigal and Blonde Blazer, which is what I want to talk about here, because I'm obviously an expert in that kind of thing. But really, there are things to talk about. I know a guy who quite eloquently described romance in Dispatch as I can fix her option and she can fix me option. But if you look closer, it is actually a bit more than that. So, let's do it. Starting with Invisigal. Rash, abrasive, aloof bad girl with way too many kinks. This seems to be a relatively popular type these days. Also, this feels like the opposites attract type of romance. Robert is a hero down on his luck. Invisigal is a former villain in urgent need of rebranding, who is right now at the very bottom of the leaderboard. And she needs a mentor like Robert, because he is willing to work with her, unlike Chase, and also he can match her banter without losing his cool most of the time. So, while he represents the enemy, she can actually talk to him, and show her attractive side. Because she absolutely has one, and it tries to break through as unbelievable as it initially sounds. Vizzy shows positive traits right from the start, though in her own peculiar way. She did try at Granny's, some fried buns notwithstanding, even brought a donut, yes, a long cream-filled one, as a way of saying thanks, which she understandably destroyed later. She honestly thought this time she did a good job, and lashed out after realizing Robert doesn't think so. She expressed regret about her powers defining her fate, and while fate is indeed bullshit, and maybe she just took the easiest option all her life, instead of trying to turn things around, she at least thinks about that and envies proper heroes. And she does try to make a difference, while being sure that she is already cut. And doing the right thing, for the right reason, finally gets her recognition she so desperately wanted. And then there's a movie scene, in which she pretty much admits to being lonely. Not lonely enough to actually pay for a ticket and popcorn, not in this economy, but I am sure she is getting there. And when actually given some snacks, she becomes, well, normal. For a little bit. And I honestly believe that being treated as normal is a big thing for her. She is too used to being seen, pun not intended, as a villain. Also, watching a movie together after work is a classic way to start a relationship. If you are interested in someone but aren't ready for a day dinner quite yet, just invite them to the movies. Talk about what you like watching. Ask if they like Lord of the Rings. See if you have common interests. And then decide if you should date. It's honestly cute how Invisigal goes from kinky dreams and trying to figure out what that means for her, to just sharing a perfectly normal moment and some sour snacks with Robert within the same episode. There's also a follow-up to that scene when the Z-team goes for drinks. Vizzy mentions snacks on the first date, drinks on the second, and possible dinner on the third. Once again, she kinda shifts into normalcy, this time in terms of dating progression. And yeah, she still drops innuendos, but even that feels much more mellow than how she started. So she is trying, not only in hero work but also in relationships. I don't know, does it count as fixing her if she actually wants to change? In any case, that part of her story goes just as you would expect. Now, let's step back for a second. All this time, Vizzy's progress was representative of the team in general, and regardless of your romance choice, your success as a team mentor determines whether she would act as a hero or as a villain at the end. By the way, this parallel between Vizi's story and the game's plot is why I consider her to be the default romance option. But then Vizi and the team do split up. During the house party where Robert's apartment, life and location of the polls get properly illuminated, the team is fine listening to Blazer and waiting for the plan. Vizi is not, so much so that she rushes in alone, endangering herself and hurting Chase, which leads to most of the team turning away from her. And this is where the story hits hard. I consider the locker room confession to be the absolute peak writing for this game. It ties Vizi to Robert's story and also recontextualizes her actions. And it is done in a masterful way. Because of Invisigal's powers, she is able to quite literally poke her head into the most dramatic part of episode 1, the inciting incident of the whole game. So that's a creative use of the character's abilities to tell the story. But it's even better than that, because Robert's powers also matter here. Mecha Man is pretty much a big robot. Yes, there's a guy inside, everybody knows that, but on the outside, what you get is expressionless metal and robotic voice. For any villain fighting Robert in his suit, it would feel like they're fighting a soulless automaton, something that cannot be hurt. So of course it would be easy to place a bomb on a thing like that. But then she catches a glimpse of him inside of the suit. And he is just a guy, caught in a trap, desperate, at his absolutely lowest right now. And she is about to make his life 100 times worse. So the lowest point of his superhero career also becomes the lowest point in her supervillain career. This is a character-driven visual storytelling at its finest right here. I swear this is like poetry, it rhymes and it is beautiful. So it's understandable that she would want to turn her life around after. Maybe without much success at first. But when Robert suddenly appears in the office, I'm sure she would feel the guilt again. And that explains why she's so eager to try and angry and sad when it doesn't work. She tries to perform well specifically because of and for Robert. Finally, she tries to do good for someone else, which is what heroes do, and that sets her on a path of redemption. As I said, poetry. And then this poetry is ruined in the last 2 episodes. There are 2 things I dislike, but I will start with the one that really pisses me off. This part here. I hate that for a number of reasons, including the fact that it just doesn't work. And I fully blame Shroud for everything, including somewhat ruining Vizi's story. So let's talk about that. And if you're asking yourself, wait, is he really going to go on a tangent about the main villain in a romance breakdown video? Yes. Yes, he is. I am that pissed. Shroud is, at least in my opinion, the weakest part of the whole story. It's not surprising because villains with predictive powers are absolute hard to write and balance out. Sure, it's fine when they predict your moves in combat, but when it is applied to general story, they too often end up being idiots with godlike powers. Here's just a few Shroud issues to start us off. If he's that good at knowing Mecha Man's suit, how come he did not predict that the pulse could survive? And if he predicted it would get destroyed, why did he do it, since getting the pulse is his whole goal? If he knows that Vizi is a thief, why the hell did he not check the case before taking it? Also, how overconfident do you have to be to pull up outside of local hero's headquarters, having only a revolver with a single bullet and dog hostage idea for an emergency plan in case your giant mech fails? Finally, his whole thing is playing the certain odds, and yet he is willing to bet it all on a 50-50 coin toss without even returning to his lair first. And then there's stuff directly affecting Invisigal. Shroud claims that she worked for him, but that does not line up at all because when was that? If she worked for him at the end of episode 6, there's no reason for him to attack her. He can just demand the pulse and then attack if she refuses. And by the end of the episode 7, he still hasn't seen her. Pun still not intended, so that leaves only citywide attack time to recruit her, which also is unlikely, due to timing, and also in that case he would have once again just taken the pulse. And you may say that maybe she was on Red Ring payroll before episode 6, and Shroud expected her betrayal, hence the gas attack. That may be, but then why did he let her rejoin later? Because that's how it looks. The biggest problem I have with all this though is thematic. During the locker room confession, Invisigal said that she left the Red Ring, and I do not want to even consider that she may be lying there. Previously, at the Sardine, she was trying to convince Robert to confess that he is Mecha Man, but in reality she was also convincing herself to come clean. And, at least with Robert choosing to disclose his superhero identity, she should have also been inspired to be truthful and accept the consequences. Shroud's monologue ruins that thematic throughline, and it is unacceptable. Another thing bothering me, though to a much lesser degree, is the fact that during the locker room talk, Vizzy had the pulse and concealed it from Robert, while in episode 6 she risked her life to get it for him. Now this requires some thinking, but it can be reasonably explained as her trying to protect Robert. When she got the pulse, she immediately got attacked by Shroud, so she got scared and didn't want the same for him, hence concealing the MacGuffin. She was doing the wrong thing, as she was used to, but for the right reason at least. I can even imagine her trying to actually steal Mecha Man's suit, hoping to stop Robert from fighting and getting even more hurt, so I can live with that. Other than these two issues though, the whole Invisigal romance is near perfect. It's relatable, beautiful, relevant to the main plot with a theme of superheroic redemption, and you get the girl who is ready to be miserable together with you. Top marks. So you may be surprised to know that after trying both options, I have decided that out of these two I prefer Blonde Blazer. I know, I just praised Invisigal romance to high heavens, even going as far as to refute part of the plot in favor of keeping it thematically perfect. When I started Dispatch, I knew nothing of the story and managed to avoid all spoilers, and when it was time to drunkenly kiss Blazer, I did not do it. Because I know how these games go, and I am jaded enough in ways of storytelling, and my thinking was, what? They immediately give me this perfect daughter of the Emperor of Mankind to romance? Just like that? That can be right. There's something better further into the game for sure. And sure enough, next episode Robert meets Invisigal, and that's the romance I got on my first run. And throughout, looking at Blazer's scenes, I was certain that I made the right choice. Right until the very end, where it turns out she has no inherent superpowers, and that made me take a much closer look at her. Similar to how Invisigal is done dirty towards the end of the game, Blonde Blazer is done dirty right from the start. First of all, she is perfect. Yes, that's an issue. She is strong, confident, the face of perfume brand, head of your SDN branch, and she is here to lift you up, literally and figuratively, and give your life meaning. Also, unrelated to romance, but I just have to mention this, she owns the single most powerful shot in the whole game. This is an instant superhero classic, dramatic standoff, clashing colors, good versus evil, with Blazer being completely outnumbered and still making them fear her. I am honestly equal parts intimidated and aroused just looking at that. She's so far out of your, mine and Robert's league it hurts. She is too good. And I feel these days we're just conditioned to not trust someone like that. I had to go through the whole game just to confirm, yes, she is actually a good person. That's one thing, but the problem with her is two-parter. Because her scenes feel like she is a character in a romantic comedy. That's not good. There's drunken flirting misunderstanding, then she speedruns HR violation during Robert's first day, while being his boss. We all know there are, let's say, home entertainment movies that start the same way. There's suddenly a scary boyfriend, and then there's the whole thing with the dress. I swear, what is happening in this game? With all that, it's difficult to take her seriously as an equal romance option and not just an afterthought to have the illusion of choice. Here's the thing, Blonde Blazer is not a superhero story romance option. Invisigal already got that covered. So, when you think you're offered a superhero romance in episode 1, it's a red herring. Blonde herring, if you will. Actually, she's not even blonde, so it's a brunette herring pretending to be a blonde herring. Yeah, that makes sense. Just go along with me for now. Literally, the first thing Blazer tells Robert after introducing herself is that he is the real hero. And she is being absolutely sincere here. We take it as a joke, because we see Robert at his lowest, but he has been a successful hero for years. He is an actual hero. Even Z-Team admits as much. He probably has been at it longer than Blazer, so it's easy to imagine him, or at least his family in general, inspiring her in some way. Especially since it's common knowledge that Mecha Man is just a normal guy. That would hold a special meaning for Blazer, who hides that fact about herself. So her interest is genuine, which Robert naturally mistakes for something else, especially since both are drinking more than they should. And yes, she has tolerance, but she's down in pure alcohol here. Robert is lamenting his ruined suit, while Blazer is actually having a rough time thinking about her current relationship. I am pretty sure she has been thinking about it for a while, way before meeting Robert. And that results in the first HR violation happening even before the work contract is actually signed. And Blazer blames herself for it. When next time she rushes Robert into a conference room to have the second HR violation, she wants to keep him safe and out of the suit, again, informed by her knowing that he has no powers and so can be in danger, but also she tries to talk about what happened last time, which is a traditional thing to do when you had too much to drink and participated in something embarrassing with your coworker. And it's still not enough. Blazer is uneasy because she feels she misled Robert, while also having the upper hand in knowing his identity. And she still has a bunch of awkward stuff to explain. So, of course, the first chance she gets, after work, she tries to tell him she actually has a boyfriend, with the man himself interrupting and making things even more awkward. Hence a clarification about breakup next time to apologize for previous awkwardness. It's honestly a whole chain of awkward events causing more explaining. That one is tied to shaking up the Z-team by cutting one of them. There is a subtle touch of all that happening as a background to Robert taking the lead on the Phoenix program, which might somewhat encourage Blazer to shake up her own life too. The dress thing I honestly cannot justify. That's a pure rom-com territory and a third HR violation for sure. We are stacking those. The only thing that can hand-wave it a bit is the fact that Vizzy was about half an hour late telling Robert that he is being summoned. So at least Blazer wasn't specifically waiting for him to zip her up. I do appreciate that she decided to use the rental dress for herself and have a bit of after-work fun. You know, take work perks whenever you can get them. And that happens to be her most important scene. During the first HR violation, she mentioned she isn't drunk enough to tell her origin story. Turns out no drinking was required. She just decided that, after all the things that already happened, this final explanation was necessary. Of course, she would still consider that she owes it to Robert, since she knew Robert's identity from the start, but also, again, because Mecha Man has no inherent powers, and not trying to hide it, she would want to take a chance and show her real self to him, hoping he can understand and accept her as she is. Something Phenomenon could never do, by the way, since if she would ever show her real side to him, his question would be why would she ever want to be small and weak? Which I believe is why she had to break up with him. He just contributed to her keeping her real self a secret and slowly getting more depressed because of it. And so she reveals her deepest, darkest secret. Without the magic amulet, she is not a superhero, but just a simple and unremarkable Disney princess. Not even blonde and slightly less prone to bursting out of her dress. So embarrassing. And also goddamn adorable. And I understand if you wouldn't consider this to be of any dramatic importance. It isn't in the overall story. Important for her though, because while everyone knows Blonde Blazer, no one really knows Mandy. Maybe they're not that different, but it's a fact that she has been neglecting her normie self in favor of hero self. And the game itself points out the importance of it, when next time Robert raises the question of who the next date is going to be with. And I 100% think the right answer here is Mandy. The whole LA County celebrates Blonde Blazer, but Roberts gets to appreciate her real self. And after that, things are good. All the awkwardness is done with, and it's just a normal dating from that point, including small displays of affection, which are just, nice. And yes, they are absolutely going to make out after finishing that big project before the Friday deadline. Maybe after they figure out if Monday is going to be an off day or not. Blazer Route is not a superhero romance, it's an office romance. You can even view her powers as a metaphor for working. She is basically neglecting work-life balance. Even when she leaves the office and meets Phenomenon, she's technically still at work, acting as Blonde Blazer. Only with Robert, she manages to finally escape her at-work persona and get some time for herself. The fact that the first real masks-off date still happens at the office, with plastic forks, food microwaved in the office kitchen and indentured servant looking on, is actually a nice touch. It's a reversal. Previously she kept being at work even after leaving for the day. Now she manages to stop thinking about work while being at the office. It's funny to compare both romance options, because Invisigal starts as a bad attitude coworker, gradually turns into romantic interest in a surprisingly normal way, after which you are hit with all the main story-related dramatic epicness. Meanwhile, Blazer starts with an embarrassing misunderstanding, a lot of awkward back and forth just to get to work first, dinner later type of office romance, and your biggest high is getting to know her outside of work. Both romances make sense when you take a look at characters and their motivations, but also both are surprisingly realistic. As I said at the start of the video, things can happen in the office, and you don't have to be in a superhero story for that. You can work overtime, fight with your colleagues, take shrapnel out of your chest, steal someone's lunch, or even, imagine that, go on dates. Which apparently not only happens but is outright common. And it can happen any which way. You can invite someone for a movie, gradually get to know them and fall in love. Or you can get drunk during the office party, engage in casual sex, and then have to deal with that discussion next Monday. I still believe Invisigal to be the default romance option, seeing how closely she is tied to the main story, and I will even go as far as to say it is, all things considered, a better romance. Locker Room Confession is an incredibly powerful scene. I would still go for Blazer though. I don't know, maybe Flambe is right and I am some sort of basic bitch, but the thing is, office romances are often messy and awkward, that's the truth. And I am glad to see one in this game that is properly messy, but actually works out nicely in the end. Guess I am at that stage of life when you appreciate that more than classic heroic redemption romance story. Anyways, that's all I got. Maybe you have realized something new about these characters, maybe you already knew all that, maybe you disagree with my take on them. The main thing is, in this game you can have a closer look and discover a lot of cool stuff. And you can make no wrong choice. Well, unless you were hoping for a Malevolent romance, then you are out of luck. I swear this game is literally unplayable. I mean, who does that anyways? There's an Australian demon woman ready to grab your dick and you cannot do anything with that. What the hell, this match? Why would you even do this to us?